This is the third video in this series. It explains what was done about this problem in the past, what great thinkers tell us to do, and what action we must now take.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and we want go home. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and we want go home.
So there is Harry Belafonte singing about the use of the tally stick in the banana trade. It may sound crazy, but a proper currency must work like a tally stick. Tally stick currency was used with great success in England for over 700 years. It is hard to imagine carrying around $1 million worth of tally sticks. So it was sensible to make the change to a paper currency, which were really receipts for deposits. These credit notes or banknotes were used from 1700, but tally sticks were still used as part of the accounting procedures of the Exchequer until 1826. Then the tally sticks were collected and exchanged for paper money. The sticks needed to be destroyed, so they were burned in the furnace in the Palace of Westminster, where Parliament met. The palace caught fire and was destroyed. Is history trying to tell us something? So let us look at the properties of the royal tally stick. The currency is made only by the king. 100% control of the money in circulation is thereby kept by the king. It is fraud-proof, and it is the only currency used to pay taxes. Now look at the sizes of the notches on the tally stick. This is our wise King Henry I, who used the tally sticks. Now at the top of the tally, a cut is made, the thickness of the palm of a hand, to represent £1,000. Then £100 by the cut of the breadth of a thumb, and £20 the breadth of the little finger, a single pound the width of a swollen barleycorn, and they would know what a swollen barleycorn was. And a shilling is rather narrower than the penny, is marked by a single cut without removing any wood. These measures may seem a bit crude, but they are not. Most people can tell the palm of the hand is wider than their thumb without pulling out a calculator. So let us see how this system really worked. Suppose the people want a new bridge over the River Thames at London. The king provides the money in tally sticks, and this is taken to the site foreman here, who is normally the reeve. Now he organized the materials and the workforce, and they would be paid in any acceptable currency. They would be paid in Roman coins, Saxon coins, and silver coins made by William the Conqueror, who was Henry's father. The stroke of genius was to make all taxes only payable in royal tally sticks. This gave the king absolute control over the legal currency in the kingdom. If they did not pay in that currency, then the debtor's prison awaited them. So the king really controlled the amount of money in his kingdom. A sensible monetary system is essential for a prosperous country. And it was during this time that this small island grew in strength and prosperity. The foundation was laid for what became the British Empire, the largest colonial power on the planet. I'm going to spend some time on talking about usury, which is charging interest on a loan. This practice lies at the very center of our social and economic problems. There are many people who are so trapped in poverty that they must borrow money until the next payday. Money lenders take advantage of these people and charge huge interest rates. This example is quite typical. This person has a problem with his car and it needs $300 rather quickly to get it fixed. So he goes and he gets a $300 loan, which he hopes to repay with his next paycheck in 2 weeks. Now the charge on that is $51 interest, and that is an interest rate of 442% per year. That is criminal and should not be permitted. If he runs into a problem and is unable to pay his $351 at the end of 2 weeks, then they add on a penalty of $40. Now he owes $391 and he is heading towards a financial crisis. The ethical beliefs of most of the world have been shaped by 3 major religions. Their sacred books, the Quran, the Bible, and the Torah, have one thing in common, and that is their condemnation of charging interest. Charging interest is forbidden. Thomas Aquinas is recognized as the greatest Catholic theologian. He has explained why charging interest is sinful. The Church has no problem with trade, but insists that in any venture the moneylender and the merchant must take on the same risk. They share the profit, if any, and they also share the loss. People and banks who lend money for interest have no risk, and they always profit. Shakespeare has some important words to say on this subject. In Hamlet, Polonius is saying goodbye to his son who is leaving on a trip. And Polonius gives him this advice: "Neither a borrower nor lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry." Now the last part about husbandry is important. It means looking after stuff. We have been encouraged by big business to consume endlessly until we are fit to burst. In previous generations, it was different. Do you remember these wise sayings? A stitch in time saves 9. Buy well, buy once. Look after the pennies, then pounds will look after themselves. And from Benjamin Franklin, he that goes a-borrowing goes a-sorrowing. We can no longer fix things to make them last longer. We have, against our better judgment, become a throwaway society. Very wasteful. The whole world is, once again, marching along the road to massive social unrest. Poverty and hunger were the forces behind the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. The steps are clear. Interest charges create inflation. Inflation creates debt. Debt creates poverty. And poverty creates hunger, followed by revolution. So here is an example. Let us suppose that you put $30,000 in the bank at the beginning of the year at an interest rate of 5%. At the end of the year, you would have $31,500. Now suppose that instead of putting money in the bank, you bought a brand new car for $30,000. You would expect that at the end of the year, if there was the same brand new car available, you would then expect to pay $31,500. But the fact of the matter is this: the two cars are identical. They have the same intrinsic value, and therefore they should have the same cost. But it costs more. And the only logical conclusion is that the currency has been devalued. Every year our currency is devalued until eventually it becomes almost worthless. This devaluation process has been going on for decades. The price of bacon appears to have increased a lot, but money has been devalued enormously. So we see in 1988 a pound of that lovely bacon was $1.90, and just 30 years later it is $5.20. That's the sticker price. But don't complain about the costs going up. Complain that the interest charges have devalued the dollar. In fact, $1 in the year 2018 only buys as much as just 36 cents in 1988. That is the reality. It is the money is becoming worthless. And in Canada, the 1 cent piece became completely worthless and was removed from circulation. Interest only flows one way, from the poor to the rich. This is why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It is a social evil that must end, and is the reason why the trade unions are always battling the owners. It is because the workers have to get an increase in wages as much as the interest rate. Otherwise, their true income shrinks. Many wise people have come to the same conclusion, that direct control over currency by a king, dictator, emperor, or government is vital for a stable and fair economy. Not surprisingly, Abraham Lincoln was one such man. He said, the government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government, which means the infrastructure, the army, defense, and so on, and the buying power of consumers, home and food. And he understood that you need more of that kind of money as the population grows. And he carries on, by the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity. There were other American presidents who tried to take control of currency away from the banks and put it in the hands of government. They were stopped by the power of the top 1%. But Canada can do that. We can have our own tally stick. Canada is one of the few countries that has the legal right to control all aspects of monetary system, but it does not do so. Direct democracy is one way to force government to use those powers again. In March 1935, the Bank of Canada opened its doors as a privately owned institution, with shares sold to the public. This was the American system. Soon after the central bank opened, a new government led by Mackenzie King introduced an amendment to the Bank of Canada Act to nationalize the institution. In 1938, the bank became publicly owned and remains so today. Mackenzie King was our longest serving Prime Minister. He served in 3 different time periods, and we should be grateful that he never took his hands off the economic wheel. This is what he made sure was in the Canada Act: to regulate credit and currency in the best interest of the economic life of the country. and he means of all of us, not just the wealthy. Mackenzie King's decision to nationalize the Bank of Canada demonstrated remarkable foresight. He understood that the key to a stable and debt-free economy was to have the government control of currency and credit. He followed the advice given by Lincoln. Mackenzie King was a Harvard graduate. He could think, understood history, and had a great feeling for true democracy. Those abilities seem to be sadly lacking in politicians today. Mackenzie King had a grim warning to us all. He said, "Once a nation parts with the control of its currency and credit, it matters not who makes the nation's laws. Usury, once in control, will wreck any nation. Until the control of the issue of currency and credit is restored to government and recognized as its most sacred responsibility, all talk of sovereignty of Parliament and of democracy is idle and futile." And that is what we believe, and we believe that a direct democracy would restore King's vision. Canada, like Britain, did have a golden age, and it was from 1938 to 1974 when Mackenzie's vision was in place. The Bank of Canada, our bank, provided near interest-free loans to the Canadian government. This money was used to build highways, such as the Macdonald-Cartier Freeway, public transportation systems, subway lines, airports, the St. Lawrence Seaway. It also funded the universal healthcare system and the Canadian pension plan. That was our golden age. In 1974, Pierre Trudeau was elected, and he made the decision to stop borrowing money from the Bank of Canada and to borrow it from private banks at compound interest. It appears that this decision was made without informing Parliament. This was the most asinine decision made by any politician ever. So why did Trudeau make that decision? Well, he was very concerned with his own self-image, and he wanted to be in all the big international clubs. And one of them, the Basel Committee, is an international think tank type of organization that's composed of the central bank governors of the G10 countries. So he wants to join them, so he takes their advice. But these people are only concerned with making sure the bankers and banks become ever richer. The result was a catastrophe. This is what happened. Here are the years of Mackenzie King's philosophy about owning our own bank and borrowing from our own money. This is what happened when Trudeau started to borrow from privately owned central banks. We have gone from something like $1 or $2 billion of debt up to $523 billion of debt in a relatively short period of time. And this situation grows worse every year because we are now paying interest on the money that we borrowed. We pay interest on the loans that were paid out for the interest on the loans, and this must end. Now, COVID-19 will cost taxpayers at least $75 billion, plus interest on the charges, because that $75 billion will be a loan from the banks. Note that if Mackenzie King was still Prime Minister, it would cost nothing. It would be our money, borrowed from ourselves, and that costs nothing. Some places do have a real national bank. The Chinese have cornered the world economy, but not because they work harder, and not because they are smarter, but because their money is really their own, and not a private bank's. That is why they can build railways in Africa and across Central Asia. It has funded the massive growth of the Chinese economy without interest payments. Now, North Dakota has its own bank. It lends money at 2% and returns the profits to the taxpayer. Now, in Canada, we borrow money from the banks. In order to pay the interest on the borrow, we have borrowed from the banks. It makes no sense at all. It is a matter of logic that no sovereign nation should have an internal debt. It can, of course, have external debts, money it owes other sovereign nations, but it should not have an internal debt because you cannot owe money to yourself. But there is a glimmer of hope. Some groups are beginning to fight back. In 2011, a lawsuit was filed by the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform, commonly known as COMER. The lawsuit demanded that the Government of Canada restore the use of the Bank of Canada to its original purpose by exercising its public statutory duty and responsibility. That purpose includes making interest-free loans to the municipal and provincial and federal governments for human capital expenditures such as education, health, other social services, and/or infrastructure expenditures. So that was back in 2011. We now see what happened. So, in 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada declined to hear the case in deference to the political process. The court said that this was a political matter, and most people will disagree, because if the Government of Canada does not follow its own rules, then surely there is a case which the Supreme Court could judge. Now, none of the political parties supported the lawsuit, and that is very easy to understand because they value their power and they value their salary, and they don't want any change to the situation. And in addition, the press was effectively silenced. So I asked a question. Did you hear about this case? Did you hear about this lawsuit and what it meant to us? And this was and is a critical issue affecting every single Canadian. It impacts on our economy, our social services, our infrastructure, our health, our security, and our quality of life. So if Commerce goes on to take this case up again, I trust it will have your support. As I said before, Lincoln was an extremely wise man. He had interesting things to say about the financial circumstances related to banks and debt, and he also had some interesting things to say about democracy. And we, the Citizens for Direct Democracy, have adopted Lincoln's philosophy on the proper governance of human society, namely direct democracy. Of course, this started back in 505 BC in Athens, and the very word itself, demokratia, demos meaning citizens, and kratos power. It was about people power. We even see something written by John Wycliffe in 1384. The Bible is for the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And Theodore Parker, who knew Wycliffe, said, democracy is direct self-government over all the people, by all the people, for all the people. And then we have finally the statement by Lincoln at Gettysburg, that these dead shall not have died in vain, 750,000 of them, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It is interesting to note that the Swiss government is run along those lines of direct democracy, and they use, of course, referendums to achieve self-government by the people. Unfortunately, we will not get back control of our currency until there is a political revolution. That will take several years because we are fighting a new elite in addition to the 1%. Now, George Orwell warned us against this social order some 80 years ago in his book 1984. He wrote, "The new aristocracy is made up, for the most part, of bureaucrats and professional politicians. And in our age, those people serve the oligarchs and the plutocrats, the 1%. But there is some action we can take, an action that is gaining momentum around the world, called community currency." This is a must-see video, just 4 minutes long. It explains the Bristol pound far better than I do. The video will play automatically on the next slide.
Bristol's a fantastic place to live. I love it here, and it's the people that make it feel so special. They have an independence of spirit that makes it quite unique. You can see it in the communities and in the businesses across the city. They're making things happen.
Although it's not all plain sailing. Like everywhere, Bristol is affected by global forces. The big banks have brought us austerity, and the spread of very large companies brings inequality and often low-paid repetitive work.
But in true Bristol fashion, we don't think we should put up with this. Banking and money should work to support people, not exploit them. And that's why the Bristol Pound was born.
It's a not-for-profit scheme run in partnership with the Bristol Credit Union. Every Bristol pound is backed by a pound sterling, and the Bristol Credit Union provide financial services to all the people in the community, regardless of income.
It's a way of using money that builds wealth for everyone, not just the lucky few. And the simple reason for that is that Bristol pounds stick to Bristol.
Here's how. At the moment, money that comes into Bristol doesn't usually hang around for long. When we buy goods from a large international business, let's say a chain chemist, most of the money quickly leaves Bristol. Just a tiny slice stays behind as wages, for example. Nearly any profits this company makes will go into offshore tax havens, big executive pay deals, and distant shareholders. Often no or very little tax has been paid on these riches, so these companies hardly contribute to the roads and services they rely on to prosper. Compare this to what happens when we buy something with Bristol pounds. The money stays and flows around Bristol between people and businesses, creating connections, opportunities and jobs. To understand this, think of Bristol like a big bucket. The Bristol pound helps keep the bucket in good repair. The money circulates within it, and the more that comes in, the more we have. When someone gets paid wages or a business makes a sale, it fills the bucket. With normal pounds, the bucket is full of holes. These are made by bigger chain companies who want to take money out of Bristol. So most normal pounds leak straight out almost as soon as they arrive. Even if we spend it at local shops, the money still very quickly leaves Bristol. Spending Bristol pounds fills up the bucket and plugs the holes. The money sticks to Bristol every time it's spent, again and again.
And already you can get almost anything you need. A business can pay its staff, pay its suppliers, or pay its business rates with them.
The benefit of using the Bristol pound isn't just a theory, it can affect our life every day. For every Bristol pound spent, Small and medium businesses create more jobs than large businesses. After all, if you had the choice, where would you rather work? An Amazon warehouse or a local bookshop?
And the Bristol pound really is for everyone. We're working especially hard in parts of the city where people don't normally have access to locally grown fresh foods. And the emergence of more small businesses can also help reduce inequality. Small or medium business owners don't usually have 3, 4 or 500 times the salary of the lowest paid person in their firm.
But this isn't just about Bristol. Similar schemes can happen in any city or region anywhere in the world. The Bristol pound is part of an international movement to reclaim money. And that's why dozens of groups all over the world are working together to develop similar schemes. So we can do things differently. And right here in Bristol, we've already started.
And the more people who get involved and use Bristol pounds, the stronger it becomes. Together we can reclaim money for Bristol. So if you're an individual or a business, sign up and start using Bristol pounds.
There's just a small note on that previous video, and it is that the rates, which is English for taxes, can be paid in Bristol pounds. So the Bristol city authorities have adopted the idea of Henry I. You can authenticate money by having it possible to pay your taxes in that currency, in this case in Bristol pounds. You can see that what's gone on in this video shows that we must have direct democracy. We must be able to reshape the world using common sense and not by the power of money. Thank you.